I'll wing it.
She is going to wing it. Welcome, everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it is time for the Kubernetes Office Hours, the monthly live stream where we hop online and try to answer as many of your questions as possible about using Kubernetes with our awesome panel of experts. So how's the stream sounding? You should be in #office-hours, which if you read the text below here on the live stream, feel free to let us know how the audio sounds. We always appreciate how we look and how we sound and things like that. Before we get started, let's do some quick introductions.
All right, I found unmute. My name is Mario Loria. I live in Southern Michigan right now, working for StockX as a senior DevOps engineer, pretty much owning our entire cluster environment, EKS, on Amazon. I'm also really involved with community, especially with George in the Ann Arbor region, and Contributor Summit and other Kubernetes things, as well as this fantastic podcast/broadcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Carty. I'm a senior developer with the City of Ottawa, who I'm more or less in charge of our Kubernetes infrastructure, so kind of a generalist in that regards. So try to be involved in the community as much as I can, do this. I'm also on the release team, where I'm currently the release lead for release notes on this for the 1.17 release.
Hi, I'm Joel Speed. I work for a company called Pusher out of London. I'm on the cloud infrastructure team here, so I do a lot of stuff to do with Kubernetes, including a bunch of stuff recently around extending it. So if you've got any controller questions, I've been building lots of those recently. I've done a lot of security stuff and auto-scaling stuff in the past as well. So those kind of questions thrown my way.
Awesome. And let's go BB and then Don. I think Bob's having some mic problems. We'll sort it later.
Hi, I'm Bhargav and I work for OpsCruise and AIOps team. And I pretty much live, eat, and breathe Kubernetes. And I try to contribute on discuss Kubernetes and in the community as well.
Okay, so I'm Dawn Foster. I work for Pivotal in London, and I'm responsible for our open source Kubernetes contribution strategy and the program that goes along with it. So I'm focused on getting the right people within Pivotal contributing to open source Kubernetes. That's my jam. I've been doing open source for like 20-some years, so I've been around.
Awesome. And this is Don's first time, so welcome. And Bhargav, this is your second time. If you're new, feel free to dip in as much or as little as you want. So before we begin, let's set some ground rules. First of all, everybody, I'd like to thank you all for joining. There are a bunch of you listening today, at least 30. That's good. So this is judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere, so there are no dumb questions. So please don't flame someone for asking what you might think is a dumb question. And remember that the Kubernetes Code of Conduct is in effect, so be excellent to each other. We've never really had a problem with that here. Everyone's excellent. That's awesome, and we appreciate that. And while we will do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster. So live debugging is off topic. We can't really look at all your IP tables and figure out what's going on. But what we will try to do is try to at least show you where to look or some tips and tricks from these people who either work on Kubernetes or have production experience to help at least get you going somewhere so you're not stuck on something. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences and pro tips. Feel free to, a common thing is you're thinking about something and you think about a tool or something, take the URL and just stick it in chat. We always appreciate that. Audience, you can also help us by pasting URLs to the official docs. Maybe you saw a blog post or something. Maybe someone's talking about a tool that you have experience with. We love to have the audience participate, so feel free to whack as many URLs there in the side as possible. And also tell us hello, what you're working on, and what part of the world you're listening in, because we like to see where we're helping people, and that really helps out. What I do at the end is grab all those URLs and I stick them in the discuss thread, which Bob will be pasting into Slack today as our show notes, and then you can look at all the URLs and all that kind of stuff there. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward. We really love to help people. So, anything you could do to recommend us to somebody or a friend, or even if you can't participate live, we always love when people go back and listen to the backlog and give us information. We're always listening on how to make the show better. Before we start, though, I would like to thank the following companies for supporting the community by lending us their fantastic engineers that you see here: Giant Swarm, StockX, Pivotal, Pusher.com, Weaveworks, VMware, the University of Michigan, Red Hat, Utility Warehouse, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And always a special thanks to the CNCF to sponsor our t-shirt giveaway. So if you ask a question and we read it live on air, we'll automatically enter you in a raffle. And at the end, you have to wait till the end. Sorry, I'm gonna give away 4 t-shirts. Normally it's 2, but we don't have a November session due to KubeCon. So I'm giving away 4 shirts. So ask good questions. And as always, when you're done, feel free to hang out in office hours. What we do is in between each session, we do collect those questions and use it to seed our next episodes. And it's also a lot easier to handle than the 77,000 or whatever people who are in Kubernetes users. And if you're joining us from that channel, welcome. Please ask a bunch of questions. We have someone from Serbia, Australia, and Kazakhstan already. Awesome. All right, let's get started. Panel, are you ready? Give me a thumbs up. All right, a CMAX. I am using MikeGen/Kubernetes-GCS-SFTP image to run an SFTP server, but I have a requirement to authenticate users via SSH keys, and I have around 30 plus users. How can I manage users and their SSH keys? I know this question is about a specific Docker image, but maybe you can, panel, you can give us some general tips as well. Who wants to take this one?
I can take a quick stab at it. I'm sure someone will need to follow up and correct me. With something like this, we had a simple kind of format where we actually incorporated the SSH keys, the public keys for the server side into the Docker file, and we actually CI/CD'd that. People would do a PR to add their public key to the Docker image, and then authorized keys file in the Docker image, and then a build would trigger when that was merged, and then it would be deployed, and they would be able to have access to that image. It would get redeployed to the cluster with the new image. So that's a fairly simple way of doing it. I think it makes kind of the most sense in the pattern that we kind of like to ephemeral things instead of modifying on the fly, or you could also do maybe secrets that are then updated in the container, etc. So
looks like Miguel wants to recommend Vault, which I'm sure someone was going to mention here. Any other recommendations on this one?
Yeah, I was going to say something about Vault. If you happen to have a Vault, it's quite useful if you've already got people authenticated there, because it has short-lived tokens to do the refreshing of things for you. What it can do is you can get it to sign certificates that people can use to SSH in. So your SFTP server would authenticate against Vault, trust Vault as a certificate authority, and then every time a user wants to access your SFTP server, they can say, can I have a certificate for 15 minutes? Assuming their Vault credentials haven't expired, it will then create a certificate based off of their SSH key, and then the pair of those can be used for them to SSH or SFTP. That's what we do here for our authentication into our boxes when we need to go and debug, and it works quite well. It's really easy to log people out of Vault, so it then logs people out of the nodes as well after 15 minutes or so.
That's exactly what I was going to recommend.
Okay, moving on. Sorry, I lost my place there in Slack. Alex, welcome, asks, hi y'all, on a running cluster, how do I determine the CNI in use? This feels like the help my cluster's broken, call somebody. So, actually generalize it up a little bit. What are some things that maybe a cluster you have not set up? How do you figure out what's going on there?
As an administrator, one of the first things I would do is kind of a kubectl get all, start looking at definitely the daemon sets are running, those main top level objects, services, daemon sets, deployments, and stateful sets. Start looking at that and get an idea of what's going on in all namespaces, especially kube systems. So there isn't really a canonical way of just getting the CNI. There isn't a cat etc OS release, if you will. So.
Yeah, so one thing you can do is get pods as will tell you what kind of CNI, and there's a file called etc/etc CNI net.d where you can go and look at if you do a cat dot for the conf list, it will probably tell you the CNI that you're trying to use. So I think that is the best way that I know of today. There's no way like you can go and query certain endpoint to get the CNI right now, but this is what I know you can get the CNI from. So I'll paste the link. We already discussed this in our offices some time back. Maybe I'll paste the link here.
Okay, anything else? Sorry, I was taking notes there.
Just thinking, you might be, if you have access to the nodes, it's the config files are somewhere under Etsy, Kubernetes, CNI. I think you'll be able to see everything that's there.
It should be under, it's under CNI netd. Unless like you can, that can be a different directly, but it's a kubelet setting. So essentially, take a look at that.
Okay, moving on. Stormmore asks, today's curiosity that I wonder if it has crossed anyone's path. I just had an entry point script in a parent container behave in an erratic fashion after the child Docker file was executing rm-fr/temp, semicolon, makedir-p/temp. Side note, any recommendations for emptying /temp as part of the Docker file? The script for the most part is a simple wrapper, and if I run into the underlying command, it still functions. So it sounds like they just want to blow away /temp and make an empty one. And this question was from earlier in the month, and it's linked if you all want to scroll up there.
And the rm-rf is the type of thing I do. Instead of splitting away /temp and makedir/temp, you can just do /temp/star, and that would leave the original sort of temp directory around.
Yeah, I'd actually recommend that too, like not touching that /temp, not touching a directory that's kind of already there. Make your own to work out of. So it's just a little safer.
Any other recommendations here?
I was just wondering about whether it's a permissions thing when they've recreated the directory. If it's got different permissions than the script is expecting, something about it is going wrong. Maybe that's why it's happening. So yeah, try not to delete that main temp directory and empty it by emptying the contents rather than deleting the whole directory, I'd say.
Okay, so check your Unixisms. Any other recommendations? All right. Kane York asked a question. I don't know, it's a partial one. I'll let the panel decide. I didn't see how you actually specify an app label. Can you add that in? We have context on this one, or am I just reading sentence fragments?
Sounds like a response to something else. I didn't see any reference to it. So
okay, we'll skip it. No worries. All right. So this is next question is one we actually get a lot. So I try to revisit every few months if we can. The Aaron Strong welcome says, looking at learning and studying for the CKA, any recommended books?
I don't really have any recommended books, but I'd highly recommend Kubernetes the Hard Way from Kelsey Hightower.
Yeah, that's an excellent guide. It can take a while, but it's going to give you the fundamentals and really break you in. There's actually a book that Heptio released a while ago called Managing Kubernetes, and I believe it's free. You should be able to find it with a Google search. It was a free release that I actually really enjoy because it gives you both kind of the administrative side of things as well as the client side and interacting, but also really digs into the control plane elements as well. So that is super helpful. And then there's a candidate handbook from the CNCF. There's a blog from, I believe, one of the Heptio engineers as well, how Heptio engineers aced the CKA. It's a little bit old, but I think some of the stuff is really relevant there, so long as you apply it to the latest Kubernetes version, which will be tested against. So definitely do some Googling, and I'll try to post some of these in the Slack as well.
When I did mine, I found this practice environment that was really, really useful. So you set up a couple of kubeadm nodes on your own machine, and it's got a bunch of questions. They're kind of like practice questions that you can execute against it. And it was really useful to just actually have some useful physical practice.
Ooh,
so I'll post a link to that in Slack. It's eerily similar to the actual exam. Probably shouldn't say that, but it is really, really good. So I'd recommend trying that out. And at Barcelona KubeCon, there was a really good talk, which again I will link, by Olive Power called Ready Steady CKA. That's got some really good tips in it. especially the kube control dry run stuff that she mentions. Really, really useful.
Wow, that practice environment.
Post a link to that one.
I didn't even know about that practice environment. That's a good one there. Meausis, I hope I get that right, says, thanks for the tips on the CKA. I've bought the Linux Foundation Kubernetes Fundamentals course plus exam yesterday. That's good to know. Does anybody else in the audience have any tips for the CKA? Or if you're a CKA wave, feels like there are more of you every day.
Yeah, I was going to second both the suggestions from Mario and Joel. Those are really good. There's also the hashtag CKA prep thread within the Kubernetes Slack. They had a bunch of good resources, or if you're thinking about studying, it's a good place to kind of bounce ideas off of people. And they have a spreadsheet with a bunch of those resources for helping people. So I'll grab the link and drop that into the thread. But it really helped me for my last minute cram.
Awesome. All right, keep asking the questions, everybody. YCTN asks, anyone using Kubernetes on bare metal? I noticed Kubernetes is hugely made for cloud providers because I had some issues with Metal LB. Anyone using Metal LB in production? We get this question quite a bit also.
Yes. Both on bare metal and on-prem and with Metal LB. But kind of need to know a bit more information if you're having any sort of problems with it. It's generally routing problems.
Yep, and Joe Tellerico wants to mention that there's a tool called Metal 3-IO as well. I'll go ahead and paste that into the main channel. And Max Guy says, loves Metal LB. I've been using it in BGP and L2 mode. Didn't run into any problems so far. And Aaron Layfield wants to add that he also uses bare metal in production Metal LB. So it sounds like people are using it. That's good. Any other comments here on Metal LB? If you have a specific problem with Metal LB, just feel free to ask a follow-up question, and then we will get to it as soon as we can. Okay, moving on. Jorik asks, is there a way to access control plane Prometheus metrics between different managed environments? I'm able to retrieve API server metrics easily, but unable to reach the scheduler, etcd, and the controller manager.
That actually sounds like a familiar problem. I think they have some instructions on that, at least with the Prometheus operator.
All right, do we want to come back to you?
So I think there are a couple of questions here, right? One is to access Prometheus metrics from different managed environments. There's something called Thanos, which pulls from multiple Prometheus servers and collects it at one place and moves the data to a storage system. That's one way of aggregating all the metrics from different environments. As far as collecting from the control plane metrics from scheduler, etcd, and control manager, I'm not sure if they do have a metrics endpoint. Maybe I can get back on that if they have one. I know the kubelet has it, kube proxy has it. I'm not sure if the scheduler and control manager has it. So Thanos is one example to aggregate the metrics from different Prometheus endpoints, and I'll get back on the other two.
Okay, if I've missed your question, feel free to ask it again. I did miss two, so I'm going to go back to them here real quick. All right, Alexander, hello from Germany. Cluster API is doing a good job of managing a fleet of Kubernetes clusters. At the same time, Kata containers or Miranta's Vertlet are great on running on VMs instead of container/pods. Storage layer may be solved by GlusterFS or Rook. Is there a project to join some of these to manage multiple Kubernetes clusters hosted in VMs on top of another bare metal Kubernetes cluster?
We use Rancher for a similar situation, just to manage all of our clusters from a single point of view. It's been very helpful. We're running in VMs, but as long as it's a compliant Kubernetes, it should be able to import it into its control plane.
And can you mix things with Rancher?
I don't
Like
think it really
traditional
matters.
pods and VMs, or does it?
No, it's like if you created your own clusters, you'd just be able to manage those clusters from within its control plane. So it just pulls them in.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure they support Kata or some of those other runtimes yet, so that might provide a bit of an issue. Be worth exploring.
Okay. Anyone else have opinions here? All right. Thanks, Alexander. I hope that at least lets you look at something. Action Janes asks, I have a Cassandra service over DCOS running in production. I'm planning to migrate to Kubernetes. Is there any community-driven, reliable Cassandra-Kubernetes operator? Ooh, this is a great question. Did all of you just open a tab to Container Hub and type Cassandra in there? Let's look. Or Operator Hub, sorry.
I knew of one from a while ago, but it hasn't been maintained. I'd honestly be Googling around.
So I see this Cassandra operator, and this is this comes from InstaCluster, which appears to be a company that sells Cassandra support. And that's the best I can do without having a operator expert here.
I've always had the awesome operators list handy with these kind of things, and they've got 4 different Cassandra operators there, so that might be a good one to look at.
Okay.
JetStack Navigator, I've heard good things about, but
Okay.
I've never used it myself. If you do have questions, Munners is quite active on Slack for the JetStack one, and he works for them.
Ooh, yes. Do we want to invite him in?
Maybe I'll poke him.
Yeah, we should have him on this show. That would be fantastic. While you're at it, ask him if he wants to join the show. Okay, hopefully that'll give you 4 options there for Cassandra Kubernetes operator. If you have any feedback on that, please get back to us. That would be fantastic, so we can help share that with the community. Tawari asks, hi team, kind of an open-ended question for the experts. With Istio/Linkerd being all the rage nowadays, when do you feel introducing service meshes makes sense for your Kubernetes setup? A lot of companies are moving towards these technologies aggressively, but what would your ideal parameter/scale when you might consider using service meshes? Thanks in advance. Let's time box this question to 5 minutes so we don't overdo it. Who's got opinion on service meshes and when you're ready to, I guess, move up the stack?
I don't have a ton of opinion. I just want to say something like to preface everything else. When you need it is the answer. Don't jump into something because it's all the hype and it sounds really exciting. Like, make sure that in your operational troubleshooting, monitoring, alerting processes, and for what your company and your goals are trying to achieve, like, make sure it makes sense first before jumping in, because it can be some dense waters. And definitely lots of other important things as well when running a Kubernetes cluster, especially in reliability and security and scalability. So that's my 2 cents.
There's a lot of overhead that comes with them, as Mary was saying. Like, we've got Istio running on our clusters in production. That's sort of only just going into production, having been worked on for about 6, 7, maybe 8 months now. But it really, I'm not sure we actually needed it. Like, there's a lot of the stuff it provides, we maybe could have got away with something much smaller. And yeah, last night we had a 3 or 4 hour incident because our cluster just exploded because we got loads of Istio auto scaling and new pods and stuff everywhere, and it just it can kill a cluster. So bear in mind there is like extra containers in every pod, and then there's a whole bunch of other pods on top of that, logging metrics. There's a lot of overhead that you might want to be wary of if you are thinking about running it. So yeah, you are.
Okay. Anyone else have opinion on service meshes? Wow, that was the shortest service mesh conversation I've ever seen.
I am intentionally not saying anything.
Yeah.
Actually, I will say one thing.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
That's all I've seen from people.
In the 117 release, at least it's slated for it. I believe sidecar containers are going to be making it, which should make the management of all those additional pods and their life cycle should be significantly easier.
Okay, anything else before we move on to the next one? All right, everybody, we are slowly but surely catching up to all the questions. Feel free to answer them. If I haven't answered your question and you feel like I've accidentally skipped it, please just let me know. It helps if you put question in like in all bold to make it easy. Everyone is tossing tons of information today. You're going to make gathering the notes really painful. I appreciate all of that. So please keep all the information going. Omicronian, welcome back. Says Istio is a beast. I reduce all the resource requests for testing. And Max Guy wants to mention that Rook has Cassandra support as well for a previous question about the Cassandra operator. So he's dropping a link there. Okay. Anything else on service meshes before we move on? Awesome. Great. Nobody's feelings were hurt. Outstanding. Linan asks, any way to access a deployment /job /stateful sets annotations from a container? I'm only able to get annotations from the pod spec through environment variables.
That's it. Annotations aren't meant to be propagated down.
Do you know why that is?
They're meant to be consumed by, like, they aren't indexed like labels, and they aren't really meant to be, you know, consumed by pods. It's more so just decorator information for like your knowledge or other things to potentially like look at it. And, you know, and you could write something that will query the Kubernetes API and get them that way, but not. There isn't a good way to like bubble that information to the pod directly.
Awesome. Anybody else? Seems pretty straightforward for this one. I see lots of people typing. We'll give you a second if you want to. We are about halfway through. Those of you joining us from YouTube, welcome. This is the Kubernetes Office Hours, the monthly live stream where we try to answer on your questions. Hop into Office-Hours on the Kubernetes Slack and ask your question. We are giving away 4 t-shirts today. So ask your question and we will give away 4 t-shirts. And I'll tell you what, I'll reserve 2 of those. We'll do two t-shirts for the people that ask questions. Those of you giving really great expert advice, I'd like to give you a t-shirt as well. You know what? It's KubeCon's coming. I'm just going to give away a bunch of t-shirts today. How does everyone feel about that? If you're just joining us in chat, please let us know what you're working on and where you are in the world so we can see where we are reaching everybody. Okay, moving on to the next question. PMC Graph asks, anyone using Gardener for provisioning / managing clusters? I looked at Ranger and had issues, looked at Cluster API, but a little too early at this time. Anyone have opinions on Gardener? Oh, Bob, I'll let you do the question. Is that you doing the HackMD there? Yeah, all right. I'll let you do that so I can read the question.
That was not me.
Oh, sorry. We're stepping on each other in the notes. No worries. No one's tried Gardener?
First time I've heard of it.
I know one of them. I'm going to ask for a demo for a community meeting or something. I remember the booth at KubeCon, but we should check it out. So yeah, sorry about that. If anybody else has experience on Gardener, feel free to type it in. Please keep answering your questions. These are fantastic. All right. M&A asks, anyone got tips for people wanting to start contributing to the Kubernetes projects? And I've got a question for this. I've got an answer for this, but I'll go last.
I can jump in on this one. There are some great contributor docs, which we'll post the links to in the Slack channel and in the notes. So that's a great place to start. Another good place to start is to pick a SIG that you're interested in, and poke around in their issues and pull requests and take a look at what they're doing and find something interesting to work on. If you're not sure what SIG you want to work on, contributor experience and docs are 2 really super friendly, great starter SIGs. And from there, you can actually learn a lot about contributing to the project. And so those are good places to start if you don't know elsewhere. Those are my tips.
Awesome. And I would like to mention that we do have a sister show to this called Meet Our Contributors that goes on the first Wednesday of every month with Paris Pittman. It's basically just like this format, except you're asking questions about how to contribute. There's Kubernetes developers there. You can ask them how they got started. They'll show you how they do code reviews. Sometimes we have code walkthroughs through architecture. It is a fantastic bookend to the show. This show's about using Kubernetes, and that show's about contributing to Kubernetes. So if you type in Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors into Google, that will take you to the right place, and we would love to have you there.
Actually, a couple other like little resources. Within the Kubernetes YouTube channel, you can find a set of playlist for the like a new contributor workshop that's sort of like it's broken up, and it will go over like our GitHub workflows. There's an intermediate track that does a little bit of a few like code-based tours. We actually have the code-based tours broken out into a separate playlist now. And if you are still, just looking to jump right in, take a look for issues that are labeled with like, help wanted or good first issue.
And that is all available in the Kubernetes contributor guide, which is one of the things that we mentioned, and we'll make sure that those URLs are definitely in the show notes. Okay, anything else for getting started contributing? A lot of, also, just hanging out here on the panel is a good way to get started, right, Chris? Yes.
Yeah, it's been a big year.
All right. Mises asked, my question is, how soon after starting to use Kubernetes have you started or required implementing add-ons, except for the CNI, which is required? Curious to know when you need to start extending Kubernetes. That is a great question.
I would kind of fall back to my answer around service mesh. When you've understood what's going on with some of the core objects like deployments or daemon sets, and you understand general workloads and how Kubernetes handles state and things, and you're really ready for the next thing. You have a requirement for it, or you think you could get a lot of value from whatever that next core service could be, or Prometheus metrics or something like that. And then I would definitely start with, and maybe even if you're not using Helm, but charts, Helm charts and operators, as we link that awesome operators. That's a great way to get kind of an understanding of how applications are put together and deployed for things like HA and whatnot. So yeah, definitely take it slow, but yeah, it can be really rewarding when you start getting some things that really add value to your workloads and what you're trying to achieve.
Who's ever in the notes trying to write down all the answers, that's probably a losing battle. So what we try to concentrate on the show notes is snagging the URLs, but you can continue. Awesome. Any other questions about when to extend Kubernetes? My goodness, the chat is hopping. I can't even track of the questions. This is fantastic. Keep them coming, everybody. Okay, so Dimitri asks, hey guys, wanted to get your thoughts on serverless on Kubernetes. We currently use AWS Lambdas, and I had a thought to get more utilization out of our cluster by running Lambdas inside our cluster. There's a project called Kubeless. Just wanted to get your thoughts on this approach. I know we've mentioned OpenFAS before here on the show. Who's messing with this? I suspect Mario.
It's not me.
I know you're on Lambda, so I was like, well, maybe he's trying it.
Oh no. Well, we're on Lambda, but we're not actually doing Lambda on Kubernetes, and I don't think we're planning on to. Our Edge team has been doing GraphQL on Kubernetes, which I don't have many stories from yet. But let's wait for an outage in the middle of Black Friday, and then I'll have a good one.
Sure.
So, but yeah, Lambda's been fun. I think Lambda leaves a lot to be desired, and I think you lose a lot of control. And so there has been talk about like, do we go to Kubernetes with it? I think if we did it again, we'd definitely look at the Kubernetes options. I think what is it now? Knative, and I don't even remember. Kubeless, I forget. So someone help me out.
OpenFAS is the other one.
Kata from Microsoft, if you're in that in with Azure Functions.
Sure. Feel free to toss in all those URLs on the Slack, everybody. Remember, the more URLs you post, the harder I have to work today. Any other serverless thoughts? I know that we have a bunch of serverless people in content coming up at KubeCon Cloud Native Con, so that's good. All right, FCS, I have been looking for a rustic backup operator, mostly to back up volumes content that can play nicely with a GitOps solution like Flux, Stash, Valero. Did not fit the description. Any other idea?
Honestly, Valero is probably the best thing out there.
Mm. Does Valero not set up for GitOps? Or is it not documented? I should ask. I can ask. If Jonas was listening, he might be able to help me out, but that's okay. Keep popping in those serverless URLs in Slack. FM project. That's a new one. I always learn of a new project every time I do this, which is part of the reason why we do this. Venkat asks, CNI question. So I have a kubeadmin initialized 1.16 cluster running with Flannel as the overlay network. Is it possible to switch to Calico/Weave network on a live cluster without having to rebuild the cluster? I don't care about the pods or deployments I deployed. With all the other cluster components running, can this be achieved? Thanks. Actually, this seems easier than the last person who wanted to switch CNIs, I remember, and keep it all up and running. And then we asked them to report back, and we never heard from them again. So if we don't care about the pods, is there such thing as blow everything away that isn't the control plane? And
I have successfully done this before. There are lots of caveats, and it really sort of depends on what you're actually using. Mm-hmm. And you might need to do like an IP like clear out your IP tables or something like that in between. I would not recommend it, but it is possible to do, and every situation is probably going to be a little bit different.
Is this one of those instances where you really are better off, even though you think you're saving time, saving your future self from a snowflake? Everyone's nodding. Starting over. Who recommends they should just start over? Raise your hand. Or
I don't think they should start over per se. I think maybe like a rolling reboot of nodes. So instead of rolling update, do the manual option, and then rolling reboots of one node comes up, new CNI is continue. I don't think they need to like blow away their entire cluster. I know that's a little easier, like I'm sure Google Cloud has this and Azure, but like for Amazon, you can blow away a node group. Or you can create a new node group, move your workloads to that. That's got the new CNI, and then remove the old one rather quickly. So I think there's other options, but I don't think just like rolling the new daemon set and calling it good and walking away and going home for the day is a good option.
We actually left the pods up and going. We were able to, we went through retained the nodes, rebooted nodes, and brought them back up later, and just sort of like progressively shifted things around. It did work, and it was in a production live cluster that it was kind of had to run into a problem with. But
I mean, the whole
your mileage may vary.
The whole effort of trying something like that is as good as rebuilding a cluster, right?
Yeah, so they're saying they're using kubeadmin. So theoretically, I don't. Obviously, we don't have access to their environment, but on paper, that should make standing up the cluster very much easier. But I don't know. That depends on their needs. I feel like with something like as important as CNI, you're better off protecting your future self. But yeah, so there's some opinions on that. Okay, moving on. Action James asks, how stable is Kubernetes for stateful applications? How much support is there for database applications? Another common question that we get almost every other month, it seems. Someone want to?
And the majority of workloads that we run in our stuff is databases. The big thing is just you got to know sort of the caveats going in. It is possible for things to not shut down cleanly. You definitely don't want to use deployments. You want to use stateful sets. Yeah, we host Postgres, MySQL, and Mongo. I hate to say it, but we do sort of we have a slew of them in there.
Okay, and as usual, I will post to Josh Burkis's now infamous blog post. It's like a 3-part blog post on running databases in Kubernetes that always has a lot of good information there. And there are some discussed threads as well where people are constantly talking about how to run databases on Kubernetes. So we will toss those into the show notes. If any of you out there in the community have a handy and want to whack that into the Slack channel, I would appreciate it.
And Chris actually just dropped a link to Vitesse too.
Oh,
do you want to
awesome.
talk about that?
Yeah.
Just a little. I don't use it, but I saw a really nice talk at the last KubeCon from I can't remember what company they worked for, but they were dealing with MySQL by themselves. They switched over to Vitesse, which is from the YouTube team, I think. So that's how Google uses what Google uses internally to scale their YouTube platform. So in terms of scale, it can handle it, and it just kind of helps. I think it's just replicates the sharding down to MySQL clusters. So it makes that a lot easier to manage if you're using MySQL clusters. Otherwise, I think for Postgres, the Zalando operator is quite good from what I've heard. So so it depends on what database you're running, and then just make sure you're using the right tool. And like Bob said, to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
Okay, any other opinions? All right. Actually has a second question, but we will come back to it in a second. Arjan asks, we have a requirement to run Elasticsearch on Kubernetes. Was planning to deploy using a stateful set and local persistent volume with no persistent storage. So he doesn't have a persistent storage solution yet. Is this a recommended setup? We use kubeadmin base cluster on VMware.
There's an operator for that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I recall us talking about the Elasticsearch operator.
We actually used to run Elasticsearch in that way on top of Kubernetes, but we actually shifted that off to a larger dedicated Elasticsearch cluster.
Yeah. So it looks like I see 2 operators, one from IBM and one from Elastic themselves, that I'm going to toss up here. People are talking. Okay, let's see. Oh, someone already posted that. Someone says that's not production yet.
Sorry, I was just going to say, there's a blog post from Elastic that they've got Elastic Cloud running on Kubernetes. It's in beta. I don't know a ton about it, but I would definitely follow their kind of pattern for deployment and managing that, and definitely be mindful of the storage you need and the type of storage and speed and all that. So
looks like lots of people have opinions on this one. Let's see. So Arjan mentions that operator. Looks like the one on Operator Hub is not GA yet. Nick says there are a couple of VS operators now, and I think the official one too. A lot of operators always seem to be in the alpha status. I hear you. Let's see. There's a Helm chart for Elasticsearch, and Max Guy recommends Zalando, who has their Elasticsearch operator, and then the blog posts from Agustin says Elastic Cloud ECK does not allow you to run Elasticsearch on ECP, which makes it harder to plug in some apps like FluentD. Amacronian asked, but on the storage, is a persistent node local storage supported now 1.14 plus? I want to say. Oof. So there are a lot of options here. Is anybody using any of these in production in the audience? I see people typing.
I will say the local persistent storage did go to GA in 1.14.
Okay. So what does that mean for us Elastic storage wise?
It essentially means that like you can, if you have disks attached to a node, you can like carve it up for a local PV, and when you attach something to it, it will always try and like schedule it to that node again.
Okay. Aaron Layfield adds, I'm using an open distro chart that's technically not in production, but it's very Wait. Oh, okay, the chart is not in production, but he's using it very well in production. Anybody else have opinions on this? So it looks like you have a chart, an operator from Elastic that's not finished yet, and then Zalando's Elasticsearch operator. And then Aaron's going to grab us the link to this open distro chart as well. Ouch. I was kind of hoping for one to rule them all. Anybody else have opinions on this? I'll just remove the previews there so it's better for the chat there for those of you watching on YouTube. Yeah, so I think I would start with the Zalando one. What do y'all think? FC mentions running a stateful set for Elastic works relatively well for them. Same with Nick. Hoping for one more +1 for someone so we get some kind of quorum on how to run Elasticsearch. But yeah, that should give you some options. I think this is something that could be an open question, and we should definitely keep an eye on it. Report back if you do decide on one or the other. Let us know, because I think that'll help us, at least the next person, figure out which one to use. Moving on, James asked, does someone use Cilium without kube proxy? Any feedback on this? This is the monthly Bob likes Cilium answer.
I wore my Cilium shirt yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes, it works pretty well. I have not had any problems with it. It's currently what we use in all 3 of our production clusters.
Okay. Anybody else have an opinion on this one? Bob just wants pretty much Cilium everywhere all over the world. Dimitri asks, I have one more question. I hope I'm getting your name right. One more question, if it's all right. Recently learned about mixins, especially the Kubernetes -mixin and Prometheus -operator. I'm wondering how everyone is deploying these with Helm. Should I have a script to build my mixins, create my templates, and deploy with Helm? Or is there a different approach? Anybody on this one?
We don't really use Helm.
Yeah, normally Mario's jumping over the Helm questions.
Hold on, sorry, I lost the hack MD and my audio cut out there a little bit.
I got you. I'll send it to you now.
Okay, cool.
I just did a search and it looks like Pavislav made a Grafana mixin, so it's unfortunate that he wasn't here today.
Yeah. Let me reread it for you, Mario. Okay. So I've recently learned about mixing, specifically the Kubernetes -mixing and Prometheus -operator. I'm wondering how everyone is deploying these with Helm. Should I have a script to build my mixins, create my templates, and deploy them?
Okay, I found it. Yeah, I found it. I would definitely start playing around just with the Helm chart, tuning options lightly in kind of a playground cluster, and get an idea for what kind of the defaults are and how it runs just from kind of a normal deployment. And then start looking into, you need to write scripts or sans writing scripts tune things to your liking. Most of the time, you can tune a chart with variables and options to get it to your liking. If that isn't exactly the case, you could always fork the chart over and run it yourself for your own needs, tuning templates and things like that. So definitely play around, definitely use the --debug, --dry run options to Helm. Make sure you're using the latest Helm as well. I don't know much about mixin. Prometheus operator is pretty straightforward. It takes a little bit of tuning though, but other than that, definitely after you do something with Helm, you can very much use your client tools to check what's actually running, get a sense of the objects that are running pods and connections and things like that. So you know exactly if something does happen or it's taking over the cluster or something isn't happening in a way it's supposed to, and you're trying to troubleshoot. You can make it easier on yourself. So.
And Nick's adding a link to the Prometheus operator. Says this Helm chart, I believe, incorporates the mixings, but not sure how well they're maintained. Bobby Tables is doing +1 to customize. Oh, actually, reading back, that's what Nick says. We use those mixings, but don't use Helm. We actually use them via customize and also git-sync, which will pre-render the mixings and use git sync to apply them. Ooh, hook me up with a link to that, Nick. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I think git sync is just this idea that whatever is in the repo is continually, whatever configuration is continually synced to the objects, the corresponding objects in the cluster. So
sweet. All right. Any other comments on this one? Okay, Bogdan says, hello from Berlin. Hello. Question, what are the services that you would never keep in Kubernetes for safety and disaster protection point of view? I mean, for the moment, I use EKS and AWS, and for the databases, I use RDS. But what other services do you recommend to be outside of Kubernetes for easy recovery? I want to add a corollary to this question as well is, do you all figure out when it makes sense, especially if you're in a managed cloud provider? Should I just use the managed database? Why even put it in Kubernetes if the cloud operator is going to do all the management for me anyway? That's just a little appendix. You don't have to answer it. So opinions.
For us, it depends on our DBA's level of how much do they need to support. Like we're looking at the hosted solutions just because it's offloading a lot of extra support. Kubernetes experience is still kind of growing, so it's just familiar territory. So I'd say it depends on what direction your organization wants to go to and the level of experience your devs have.
Mm-hmm.
And how much customizability you want. Like that's the kind of trade-off when you're going to a hosted database. You give up a lot of options, but it depends.
I want to completely mirror that. We're startup life moving very fast, and a lot of it's just deferring extra load on us. And I'm really the only core Kubernetes person, and so running something on Kubernetes is really exciting, and you get a lot of benefits. But there's also a little bit more management overhead than just deferring it to a cloud provider, especially these days. So they give you everything you need. The endpoint, there's even TLS kind of built in, at least with RDS as well. Things that you don't have to worry about as much. So, we would love to run a lot more. Like a good example is Elasticache at Redis. We actually use Redis through AWS, but I very much consider just, taking a weekend and trying to get a really scalable solution on Kubernetes. It doesn't seem too hard, but it just doesn't seem to make sense. It's not a ton of money to run, and it just is really nice not having to worry about it. So.
Aaron would like to add that if you're bare metal, you don't really have much of a choice. Nice. Miguel says, Ceph, don't ask me why. But it does seem like it's a good idea, right? If you have limited Kubernetes knowledge, why add databases to your life? You probably have your hands full. Seems like a not bad way to do it, especially with the managed services being as good as they are lately. Anybody else have opinions on what other databases? Is there anything else other? I would think that there's a plethora of custom-made apps that are very, very stateful.
Anything that depends heavily on consistent POSIX identity or talks to Kerberos.
You would not want in your cluster.
Yep, and also Atlassian products.
All right, Mario has a strong opinion on that. Anything else? Like I'm sure there's an entire class of custom apps that you might not even know how well they run in a container. Maybe, don't mess with it.
Yeah. So on that, we have a lot of COTS apps, so consumer off the shelf, and some of those they just don't support containers or Kubernetes. So instead of taking that load onto ourselves, you kind of got to roll with what they provide you.
Mm-hmm.
From experience, anything that holds long-running connections can be a real pain in the ass on Kubernetes.
Okay.
Like trying to just gracefully drain those has been a big problem for some of our engineers for the best part of 2 years. So maybe reconsider that.
That's a good one. I hadn't tried it. Tried that one. Okay.
Most of our products use WebSockets and stuff, so our customers are like consistently connected to us. So it's problems when we want to roll clusters and upgrade pods and stuff.
Awesome. And then we have time for 3 questions. Bob, I've got the raffle at the top of the HackMD document. If you want to snag us 4 winners, that would be fantastic while I finish these up.
Sure.
All right, Dan P asks questions. What are some people are doing to end-to-end encryption within the cluster itself? Is it just using a service mesh like Istio, or do you have something within the cluster like Cert Manager issuing certificates to applications?
We just rolled up the Linkerd to provide that, and it's working really well. It doesn't give you the overhead that Istio does, and it's quite easy to maintain so far. And as the kind of like Mario, I'm the sole kind of Kubernetes expert. I don't have to deal with that extra headache, and I get a lot of those little benefits, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Heard good things about Cert Manager too, so depends on your use case.
Anyone else have opinions on this one? Okay, so Linkerd audience, if you have any other recommendations, feel free to type them. Moving on, Venkat, second to last questions. For those who are scared of writing YAML, not me, is there any front end that generates the YAML for them? There's dry run, like kubectl create deploy nginx image write dry run, then you tack a -o YAML into a file. But they want to use a form or a GUI or something like Kickstart GUI to generate a Kickstart file from like your Linux days. Any opinions here on making people's YAML writing life easier?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one. I'm a YAML engineer 3 at this point. So Helm has a command called Helm template, and this is really nice. Maybe starting out when you say you find a chart, something that looks interesting, you can actually Helm template the chart, and it just kind of prints out all of the YAML for all of the objects. So the values and variables and other things like that would go into the chart. It mashes those into the template, creates the resulting manifest and prints that out for you. And that's at least a great place to start. I think you're going to have to understand some YAML to some point for editing certain things or pulling certain things out. But you can definitely kind of get around, at least at this point, with all the projects that are out there. You can get around having to start from scratch for most things.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron wants to add, use an IDE with a Kubernetes plugin that you can generate templates from. That seems like a simple thing you could do. VS Code has one. And I'm going to whack in a link there for Pulumi, which is kind of like a higher level SDK for your favorite language that kind of has like native thingers from your thing. That might be like way to the other side of what you're looking for, but some really interesting work happening there, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Any other tips?
Yeah. Brendan Burns had a tool, I can't remember what it was called, that would kind of annotate your code and it would produce the YAML out of that. Ballerina also does something similar, but I'm not sure if that's a very specific use case. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. It's just a tool to kind of help you validate your YAML if you're kind of pointing things break. Instrumenta has a kubeval, and so that'll validate your Kubernetes against the current API standards. So it really helps identify what you're doing wrong and tells you where to fix it.
Yeah, and then let me get the URL for Ballerina. And then Brendan Burns, I've seen him do this talk like 4 times, and I can't remember the name of the subject. It's just hard to Google for because he's a Kubernetes co-founder, so all you get is interviews when you search for him. But he has a tool where he's trying to solve it. A lot of people have tried to solve this. We tried to solve this with KSonnet at Heptio back in the day, and weren't really able to find any kind of traction there. So there's a lot of work in this area. So there's the Ballerina Kubernetes stuff. Is that?
I think Draft does that to an extent. I haven't played around with it for a while.
So yeah, some options there. We are running short of time. So last question before the raffle. Augusta says, what's your approach to develop microservices locally, specifically when your microservices depends on others? Scaffold, Helm, plus Minikube? What options do we have here? This feels more like a local. What do you do for local development in general here?
Kind.
+1 for kind.
Yep. I saw someone else mention kind earlier as well. So kind is Kubernetes in Docker. It is a Kubernetes project, and someone will snag us. Someone, not Bob, can you snag the URL?
I do use like Minikube for some things, especially where I have to swap out like a CNI
Mm-hmm.
and a few other like different scenarios. But those are more on the ops admin side of Kubernetes.
Oh, Kind is on Linux. Augustin's saying Kind is not available on Linux. It absolutely is.
Oh yeah, and it also works on Windows. So when you're on
Yeah.
your gaming rig, you can still spawn a big cluster. It also takes a config file, which you can define how many nodes you want and other parameters, which is really cool.
Yep.
So I definitely recommend it for testing kind of multi-node setups. So really cool utility.
Yep.
I know our developers actually really only know Docker super well, and so we kind of let them test locally with Docker. So there actually are Docker compose files for their application, as well as Kubernetes manifests and whatnot. And I think kind of the DevOps versus developers, we there's an inflection point where the developers don't really care as much about the Kubernetes configurations. We try to abstract that away in templates, and then they just fill in the values for what environment variables or maybe scaling parameters and things like that should be. So.
Yep. And Konstantinos would like to remind everyone that MicroK8s is also available. I know people use that. And both MicroK8s and Kind have channels on the Kubernetes Slack, which is really handy. Whatever tool you use, those developers are available. Especially Konstantin. Bother him with all your questions. He really loves that. Okay, we're running a tad over, and we want to wrap this up. I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank everybody for joining. Our winners are Alexander, PMC Graph, Venkat, and Augustine. You've won the question. You ask a question, you get T-shirts. And I'm going to give out 2 extra shirts. Going to give one to Nick Dash and Amacronian. I will PM you today. Amacronian's obviously been here multiple times. And Nick, I really appreciated all your feedback today. So who knows? You join. I just might be in the mood to give away more T-shirts than I am allocated by the CNCF. So with that, everyone, please feel free to hang out in office/hours. In the Discuss forums, we will go ahead and post in all the show notes and all the links. We will be at KubeCon and Cloud Native Con, so there is no session next month. I will make sure that in our notes, I put our little schedules and where our talks are. So if you want to come say hi to us, come everybody. Bargav, welcome back. Dawn, I hope you had a good first time and that you want to show up again. And with that, any last words, everybody? Audience, any last comments? Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you coming. And with that, we will see you all in December. Are we going in December? We will see you all the next time that we go live, and I will make sure that we put that information on the top of the channel. So with that, thanks, everyone.